What's going on, Badger Nation? It is Mike here from Ad Badger, and I am super stoked about this episode. Steven, are you stoked too?
You know, Mike, I don't think I've been more excited to record a particular episode. I mean, even just while we were prepping for the show, I was getting giddy. In fact, I woke up this morning, saw some Amazon news, and was instantly like, that's our episode for today.
No way.
It's been a long-awaited thing that we're going to be talking about today, and it's finally here. It's like Christmas came early for us.
When I was writing our show notes, I was like, this is the, one of the biggest sponsored brand ads updates. And then I was like, erasing the word biggest, and I wrote the word alarming. Like, it's alarming that we haven't had this update until now, and we've had sponsored brand ads for such a long time. So today we're going to be talking about this big and alarming update to sponsored brand ads, which is search term reports inside the ad type of sponsored brand ads. But before we do, I want to give a quick shout out to Brian Andris. Thank you so much. He left us a 5-star review on our Apple podcasts. It's how we can help spread the word of Amazon advertising best practices to people. So thank you so much, Brian. His review, best Amazon podcast, entertaining and informative. I'm a longtime Amazon seller and I'm just getting started with ads. Welcome to the club, Brian. Listening to these guys has helped us get started in the right direction. Some say the one direction. Content is always very relevant and valuable. That's what we try to do, Brian, where every single episode is all Amazon advertising, the latest news, tips, and tricks, as well as to leave you with something pretty tangible you can go and improve your campaigns.
Thanks, Brian. We think you're awesome.
Heck yeah. So, sponsored brand ads, search term reports. We're going to be talking about some of the nuances of sponsored brand ads search reports and how some keyword targeting options are both different in sponsored products versus sponsored brand ads. We're going to be talking about, really, this is such a fundamental theme in the world of paid traffic, search term management or sort of impression management, the things that you're appearing for. And paid traffic is really this constant push and pull, this push of trying to cast a wide net to try to find new things that convert for you, and then finding those things that convert and then amplifying those. This is true on pretty much any paid traffic platform where you're trying to find the best converting items, whether it be an audience or in this case, search terms, and then amplify it. We've always called it RPSB, research, peel, stick, and block. Research, cast that wide net, peel and stick, peel out the converting item, stick it into its own sort of manual target, and then if you can, block it from the source. So we're going to be touching on some of these themes in today's episode, really big updates for sponsored brand ads, Steven.
Yeah, and one thing that we have kind of been seeing between sponsored products and sponsored brands is that clearly there's two different product development teams from Amazon that are working on these advertising products, and we don't think that they really communicate with each other a lot, or at least they don't have the same oversight decision-making team because they function so differently. Even just like you said, like search term reports coming, you'd think it'd be easy to hey, just copy paste the code for search term reports from sponsored products to sponsored brands, but clearly it's not that easy. And one of the things that we even found out now that we have search term reports that we'll dive into is that sponsored products and sponsored brands have different definitions for what a broad match keyword is and what it does and what qualifies. So we'll dive into that. It only raises more questions for sponsored display. Who's working on that?
Who's that?
What kind of
that guy's in the basement. Guy's in the basement.
So yeah, a lot going on, and it's exciting and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, starting off the bat, there's 4 match types for sponsored brand ads and only 3 for sponsored products. Sponsored brands, exact phrase, broad, modified broad, which behave so differently. It's And it is the 4th one.
And what's funny is a lot of people listening right now are probably like, "What do you mean? There's 4 match types?" Like, when I look at the drop down, or when I'm in Campaign Manager, like I only have 3. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to tap into that 4th one and what you have to do to get access to the 4th match type.
Stephen, I love secret goodies. So if someone doesn't know that modified broad is the thing on modified broad on sponsored brand ads. Also, I have to say, everything relating to this episode is a bit of like it's like a lot of words and like a lot of letters to say very similar things. So I want to do a quick recap of some terminology before we go any further. We've got search terms, we've got keywords, and we've got targets. Let's start, and a lot of times they're used interchangeably, and I think sometimes in common vernacular they're used one way versus what Amazon says versus what maybe some people say. So I do think it's worth taking a quick moment and actually breaking down some of these keywords. Look at this, I told you. Breaking down some of these terminologies. So, Stephen, keyword versus search term versus target. Why is it worth being sure that we're all on the same page about these things?
Well, first of all, just because you don't want to sound like an idiot when you're talking, and you want to sound like you're professional and getting your terminology correct, so that you're not saying like, oh yeah, the customer typed in this keyword, or I'm going to add negative search terms.
Right.
So keywords are what you as the advertiser are selecting to target, and we'll jump into what we mean by target in a second as well. And search terms are what the customers are actually typing in. I think a lot of people, especially if you're listening to this episode or this podcast, I should say, like you probably know the difference between search terms and keywords. Search terms come from the customers, keywords come from us. And based on the match type, if it's a match, then your ad qualifies to show in that search. The thing that I'm not sure a lot of people know about is targets. And probably one way to put it is all keywords are targets, but not all targets are keywords, because you can also be targeting, you could be targeting a certain keyword, or you could be targeting a certain ASIN, or you could be targeting a certain category, or you could even do negative targeting.
Or you can have auto targets.
Or auto, great example. Yeah, like targeting close match or targeting loose match in those automatic campaigns.
Yes. So this is so interesting because when you go into the world of SEO, deep seated into the world of SEO is this word keyword. And the way that it gets talked about is, I'm ranking for this keyword. Look who's appearing for this keyword. And then you have to really take a moment, like that's in the SEO world, where what people talking about SEO, when they say, hey, I typed in the keyword running shoes and look who's ranked number one, what that really means is someone made a search for running shoes, meaning the search term was running shoes. So really the correct terminology is, I rank number one for the search term running shoes. I just really do think the word keyword is so, it's like, when they talk about the Big Bang and how there was like a mix of gases like the helium and the hydrogen, like the word keyword was one of those things for digital marketing, and it's just everywhere
all
now.
Over the place.
Yeah. So even though search term means the things that people search, and a keyword is what you actually are bidding on inside your PPC campaigns, a lot of people, especially when we refer to it on SEO, they call those things that people search keywords, which from a PPC world is not accurate. So just to summarize, targeting is going to be how your ads are triggered, and they can be sort of auto targeting, close match, loose match, substitutions, complements. They can be manual product targeting. There's like the categories and the star refinements, as well as individual ASIN targeting. Then you can have keyword targets in a manual sponsored brand or sponsored product campaign. And then, of course, those keywords will trigger search terms. And search terms are what actually earned the impression or the click. So that is the relationship between targets, keywords, and search terms. And hopefully that's all clear now.
But now that we have those sort of definitions out of the way, let's actually jump into what's new with sponsored brands this week. And just so you guys know, when we say this week, today is November 21st, 2019. And this episode, so we're recording this before Thanksgiving, but the episode is going to go live on the air after Thanksgiving. We're a couple weeks ahead right now. So by the time you hear this, hopefully you've already discovered search term reports. And if not, well, at least now you can really jump in and start using them. And so essentially the impact of this is threefold. With these search term reports, now we can do much better negative keyword research. We can use that to refine our broad and phrase match keywords, find out which irrelevant searches were coming through. And I mean, that was like the big thing that like I was always waiting for. It's like, this broad match keyword's not performing well. I have no idea if it's, my keyword's relevant. So I have no idea what searches are coming up for, why it has such bad performance, but now we can find out. The second thing is we can now do RPSB with our sponsored brand ads. We couldn't do that before without the search term reports. We could only do that for sponsored products. And then we've also found a third thing, which is that broad match isn't what you probably think it is, if you're thinking in terms of sponsored products. Now, we'll dive into this a little bit. I did know that broad match. Let's just dive into the next part of the episode, and we'll kick it off with talking about broad match keywords and what they are. So yeah, probably the first and most sort of interesting thing, or at least most pressing thing, is how different these broad match keywords are between sponsored products and sponsored brands. I had heard before that broad match keywords in Amazon included synonyms or similar words to your keywords, items like that. But if you ever download a sponsored product report, and me and Mike actually just double checked this while we were prepping, download a sponsored product search term report, look at all your broad match keywords, you will notice the customer search terms are never synonyms for your broad match keyword. In fact, the only difference between a broad match keyword and a phrase match keyword is that with broad match, the word order doesn't matter. So if we were doing, the classic example, if we were doing like men's running shoes as a phrase, the search term has to have that full phrase, unbroken, like that. But a broad could do running shoes for men, or like, men's trail running shoes. It can break up the word order, insert words in between, and that's the way it's always worked. So I was confused when people would say, oh yeah, broad match includes synonyms, other stuff. But now that we just downloaded our first sponsored brand search term report, Mike, what did we find?
So sponsored brand broad matches versus sponsored product broad matches behave so differently that they shouldn't even be the same. They shouldn't even be labeled the same way. So now we're going to have to be, I mentioned earlier in the show about how verbose this is getting. So we're now going to have to specify sponsored products broad match versus sponsored brand ads broad match because they behave so differently. So for sponsored brand ads, as long as the search term is broadly related to your keywords, then it qualifies to trigger that keyword. So this includes synonyms. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to interject, when we mean broadly relates, we mean capital letters broadly, like a very broad.
Yes.
We'll give you some examples in a moment.
Yes, like a branching tree, like you're somehow playing a game of telephone, meaning your source keyword that you punch in versus what it actually gets triggered for will look vastly different. So we actually looked up some examples, and with some finesse, here they are. Organic spicy horseradish mustard for pretzels.
Sounds like a tongue twister.
That's a tongue twister. Lots of tongue twisters in this episode. But organic spicy horseradish mustard for pretzels, that was what we were bidding on broad match. And Steven, what was the search term?
Pretzel.
It only relates to one word, not even the entire keyword. If someone's just searching pretzel, not only that, but the search for pretzels is completely different than selling horseradish mustard. Totally different. So these things are completely different. Yes, they both have the word pretzel in it, but that is not, a direct hit, you would say. And we had another example, which was pretty crazy. Steven, you want to take this one?
Yeah. So the keyword, so that first example shows you that the search term only has to actually relate to one of the keywords, not even all of the keywords. You'll never see it with sponsored products. With sponsored products, all of the words in your keyword need to be in the search term. You can reorder them, restructure them, whatever, but all of the words have to be there, not with sponsored brand. The other example, and this shows you just how widely this broad match works, the keyword was mint toothpaste. The search term was Harry Lee's honey and lavender hand soap.
It's not even the same thing.
It's not even the same product. I guess in Amazon's algorithm, it was like, okay, bathroom supplies. So it throws us in there. But I mean, like...
Is this a compliment?
Right.
Yeah, this is behaving like a compliment.
Yeah. So I get it. I guess like maybe the person who's looking for hand soap is in the market for mint toothpaste, but you can the conversion rates are going to be low.
Yeah, this is search advertising. People are typing in what they're looking for. Why serve them this broad? So totally crazy. We also saw a third very strange thing with sponsored brand broad, which is, this happened all the time, and I used to do a lot of Google ads. Foreign languages triggering my English keywords. Crazy. We started seeing some Chinese symbols in some of our search terms. And this is pretty crazy. Never saw this in sponsored product search term reports. Never. So that's pretty wild.
Yeah, you would actually, if you wanted to target, say Spanish speakers or like Korean speakers, you would actually have to, get a translator, do Google Translate, and then type in the actual Spanish word as your keyword. But that would be for sponsored products broad match. For sponsored brand broad match, Amazon has some sort of translating algorithm. When we saw like those Chinese symbols, we copied and pasted that into a Google Translate, and what was coming out on the other end was indeed, relevant searches like mint toothpaste or whatever. But yeah, just something to keep in mind, because maybe the Chinese phrase was Harry Lee's honey and lavender soap, So you'll definitely want to do some fine-tooth combing through your search reports for any of your brand ads that you're currently running.
Right. Now, here's the extra crazy thing. Here's the fourth match type inside sponsored brand ads, which is, let's say you're listening to this and you're like, wow, I would never want to use broad match keywords in my sponsored brand ads. Not all of them. We did pick out some outliers, but it is worth mentioning them because, again, inside your search term report, you're only seeing things that you at least got one click for. Typically, every once in a while, you will get a just pure impression, no click row in a search term report. But in general, you're only seeing things that have had a click, which means even with a 1% click-through rate, that means 99% of impressions you just don't have any data for in your search term report. So if you're wondering, oh man, should I ever use broad? Again, use it in the research peel, stick, and block. Use it in its own dedicated area. Use it with a low bid. Use it with loads of negative keywords, because now you can do good negative keyword research with it, but also do proactive negative keyword research with it too. So this is an activity that, I carried with me from my Google Ads days, where we would do proactive negative keyword research, where you would actually go to a keyword research tool and you would type in toothpaste, and you would type in bathroom, and you would type in, cleaning products. And even if you're saying why would I do research around cleaning products if I'm selling toothpaste? Well, you would do that to get a whole bunch of new negative phrase ideas. And that's what I would call proactive negative keyword research, because it helps you attack that 99% of search terms you actually don't see. So with all that said, that's how you would want to use broad match inside your sponsored brand ads. But if you wanted behavior similar to sponsored products broad match inside sponsored brands, That's actually known as modified broad. So that was a really long way to get here. But modified broad match, it's a term that Amazon borrowed from Google. It's the plus sign in front of each word in a broad match keyword. So, a broad would be running shoes for men, but modified broad would be running shoes for, and then you could put a plus in front of men, and then every search that triggers this keyword has to at least have the word men in it. Now, it might trigger in this example, fitness equipment for men, and that would be valid. So if you really wanted to hone in on, running shoes and men, then you would put that plus sign in front of running, and then in front of shoes, and then in front of men. And, we'll have this in the show notes and on our blog post associated with this episode, so you can see some of these examples. But that is modified broad. Modified broad, it behaves the same way in Google Ads. It behaves this way in sponsored brand ads. And this is actually how, without putting plus signs, that broad match works in sponsored products. Stephen, that was a mouthful.
Yeah, but I think you explained it really well. And yeah, essentially,
thanks, dude.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Maybe I'll read your 5-star review next week.
Okay, if I leave one. Just kidding. Yeah,
I'm working on it. I'm trying to earn it.
One of these days, I'll leave a review for us. But yeah, essentially the default broad match type in sponsored products is modified broad match, as the rest of the search engine marketing world knows it, as far as like Google calls broad match, what Google calls modified broad match and what sponsored brands calls modified broad match is just the default broad match for sponsored products. And just to restate what Mike was saying, like if you just said running shoes for men in sponsored products, you'd only get searches that have the words running and shoes and men in it. But with sponsored brands, you would get fitness equipment. You could maybe just get like hiking boots could probably trigger that keyword. So if you really want to make sure, like, no, I only want people who are searching running. Like, I don't want hiking, I want running. You just throw a little plus sign, no space, just plus running, no spaces. So plus running shoes for men would guarantee that the word running is going to be in the search, or you could do plus running plus shoes for plus men, because you probably don't need for to be in the search. But yeah, so that is how it works. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys, and hopefully you can take advantage of that new piece of knowledge now with these search term reports and your sponsored brand ads.
Alrighty, and as we were looking at these search term reports for sponsored brand ads, we took a look at some of our ASIN targeting, ASIN targets. And again, it is a bit confusing to have an ASIN target, because you are intending to get impressions and clicks on that specific ASIN's product detail page. However, we discovered something pretty crazy that I did not expect. Stephen, explain this sort of X-Files level moment.
Yeah, so we've always noticed on sponsored product campaigns, at least, that if you have a product targeting campaign and if you look at the placement settings, your product isn't only displaying on the product pages and getting impressions and clicks there, but it's also will be displaying at top of search and rest of search, which made us realize, oh wow, okay, product targeting isn't the same thing as product page placement. It just means you're following that product wherever it may go. And the new sponsored brands search terms report confirms that. And by the way, if you didn't know this, you can now do product targeting with sponsored brands. That's also a new thing. Used to only be able to target keywords, but now you can actually target individual ASINs or brands or categories with sponsored brands. So we looked at our ASIN targets that we had going, and all of the and in the right-hand column, all the search terms are a whole bunch of different searches that were related to those competitors' ASINs that we were targeting. Sometimes the search term was the actual competitor's brand name. Sometimes the search terms were just generic keywords that the competitor happens to be on the search page for. But the point is, all of these were actual search terms that we were showing up for. We were basically just following our sponsored brand ad was just following these ASINs around the Amazon search page, wherever they may be. And sponsored brands can also appear in other locations, not just on top of the search. They can appear on the on the sidelines, on the bottom, So yeah.
Yeah, so super interesting. Again, for this one, I don't know if it's necessarily, I mean, it's interesting that it's not as intended. And I'm almost ready to do an experiment where I have an ASIN target with a plus sign in front of it to see if it actually targets that exact product display page. But I don't know if this is necessarily a bad thing. Like, this isn't as crazy as, some of the keyword to search term matchups that we were talking about. But again, it's the power of being sure that, you do have the search term report, and you can now use this data to inform what actions you take. So if you are getting these search impressions and search clicks that aren't converting, you can look at the ASIN that you're targeting and decide whether it's worth it to continue appearing for it now. So that's pretty big.
So that is essentially it for the show. Search term reports for sponsored brand ads. Mike, were you going to say something?
Stephen, we have a really high bar for the show where we always want to leave people with something that they could, end the podcast, immediately jump into their accounts and start improving them and getting better results. And I think this is it to a T, in the sense of this is a new optimization task. Where you used to just download search term reports for sponsored products, you now must also download search term reports for sponsored brand ads. Look through it, make some new considerations about how the broad behaves, add new negatives. If you're going to use broad, be sure you add proactive negatives as well. It's pretty big. I mean, this is a new optimization task. The time that it now takes to optimize an Amazon ads campaign has just gone up, which I generally think is actually good. Hear me out. It's good that it's getting a little bit more, arduous to optimize campaigns because, if you're not listening to the show, you probably don't know about it, and you're probably not taking advantage of it. And maybe these people have loads of broad in their accounts. So we're here, we're taking, everyone listening to the show is like taking action in their accounts, and it's going to get easier for us as more and more people don't take advantage of all these new optimizations.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Amazon's quickly evolving, quickly changing. And if you guys are, listening to this episode, then you're right on like the leading edge of Amazon advertising, which is amazing because the more complicated it gets, that just means, and if you're ahead of the game, then you're ahead of your competition and you're taking advantage of new things that they're not doing yet. But yeah, this definitely opens up a completely new way of thinking about sponsored brand ads, because before, when we talk about RPSB, we talk about, separating your broad from your exact and separate ad groups. Sponsored brand doesn't have ad groups. I'm guessing ad groups are coming to sponsored brands once that product development team gets around to it. But yeah, we used to just, at least I used to just lump in my exact and my phrase and my broad match keywords all in the same group, because there was, the purpose of segmenting those out is for,
Right.
keyword research, but that wasn't a thing. You couldn't RPSB without search term reports. But now, it's game changing, because now we'll want to have like, a broad match and a phrase match only campaign for your sponsored brands. And then as you get conversions, you're going to be pulling those over and RPSBing and moving those converting search terms over to your exact match campaign. So total new way of structuring your sponsored brand ads. It's a huge game changer.
That's right. Use it, everyone, and improve your campaigns. And we'll see you next time here on the Badger Den. How many clicks it should take before. Oh my God, my phone's ringing. My bad. It's my mother.